Right then guys, it's PSL here for the second part to my video series on the 2010 World Cup according to FIFA 18. In the first episode we went through the group stages as well as the round of 16 phase. So if you want an explanation as to how this series is being done, such as the settings I'm using, etc. And if you want an explanation as to how both Argentina and Spain were knocked out in the groups, and want to watch England throw away their World Cup hopes, and Germany get defeated by Switzerland, then you'll want to watch the previous episode which I uploaded a few days ago. So with the round of 16 matches ending as they did, that means the quarterfinals look like this. The two countries who provided the biggest upsets, Colombia and Switzerland, will be facing off against each other. Belgium will have the tough task of beating probably the favourite of the remaining teams, Brazil. There will be a good match between Uruguay and Croatia, but before all of those games, we have to see who will come out on top between Portugal and France. After only 3 minutes into the match, France was saved by their crossbar. 5 minutes later, Lloris had to provide all the stopping power, and he did so easily as a shot by Moutinho went straight towards him. France did have a few goal scoring opportunities, but their second one took 53 entire minutes to arrive, and much like their first chance, it was horribly wasted. This was how the game played out for the rest of the 90 minutes. Many chances just weren't converted into goals. France got ever closer to scoring a goal and breaking the deadlock, but still couldn't quite get the ball over the line. In the final few minutes, Portugal were the team on the offensive, but again couldn't score. Even a Cristiano Ronaldo free kick, whilst good enough to bring Portugal the draw against Spain earlier on in the real-life World Cup, was too far away and just about too easy for Lloris. With the game still at 0-0, extra time was needed to separate these two sides who, after 90 minutes, had a similar amount of possession, a similar amount of shots each, and the exact same number of shots on target. Pogba had the first real shot on goal in extra time, but again the keeper was more than a match for him. 103 minutes into this goalless game, Giroud was on the run but ended up surrounded by Portuguese defenders and lost the ball. Unfortunately, Jose Fonte passed the ball straight to Paul Pogba, who had his shot saved, but it deflected to Ousmane Dembele, who grabbed a goal for France to give them the lead heading into half-time in extra time. Of course, the final few minutes were full of relentless Portuguese attacks. Ricardo Quaresma came close, but couldn't quite equalise the game. Even Cristiano Ronaldo wasn't able to bring Portugal back on level terms. And so France won the first quarter-final game, knocking Portugal out in the process. The second quarter-final tie is between the two Bs of Brazil and Belgium. Belgium really weren't messing about, as after only 2.5 minutes of gameplay, Hazard was able to run into Brazil's box past to Mertens, who gave Belgium an almost instantaneous lead against Brazil. From that moment onwards, the game just saw relentless Brazilian attacks, and Courtois was certainly earning his keep in the Belgium team. The remarkable thing about this game was that, after 45 minutes played, Belgium had only one shot on goal, but it just so happened to go in. Brazil, meanwhile, had 5 times as many shots, twice as many on target, but infinitely less goals. The second half saw no let-up in the amount of Brazilian efforts on goal. Neymar's stretched attempt ended up nowhere near goal, but Coutinho was the closest to scoring a goal for Brazil, but again, Courtois was more than a match for him. Belgium had another crack on goal, but Moussa Dembele, despite not being closed down at all, saw his shot go off target. Frustratingly for Belgium, 85 minutes after they scored a goal, Brazil did the same, courtesy of Willian running it down the wing, squaring it to Jesus, who had an easy tap in to make it 1-1. The game was destined to go to extra time, but Brazil had other ideas as Willian again played another ball through to Jesus, who had to outrun Alderweireld to get to it, and he did. And by that point, there was very little Courtois could do. Brazil, in the dying moments of the game, took the win off of Belgium, and so the game ended, rather remarkably, 2-1 to Brazil. But if you look at the conversion rate of chances, Belgium were much less wasteful. They had a little less of the ball and had a fifth of the total shots and shots on target compared to Brazil, but only ended with half the goals. You could spin this as both a positive and a negative, but Belgium had only one shot on target, but that one shot was converted into a goal. Still, two fewer than they needed to beat Brazil. Next up is the most unlikely of quarterfinals, and one which most would have expected to be Germany versus England. But instead, it's ended up being Switzerland versus Colombia. That's a disappointment for some, least not the English fans. But we all love a World Cup upset, and as unlikely as it would have seemed, one of these sides will end this game as semi-finalists. The only two chances worth looking at in the first half were both from Colombia, and in fact they were both from Falcao. A powerful shot in the 6th minute was emphatically stopped, and much later on a half-hit header proved to be surprisingly difficult for Sommer to stop, but he did so. You may think I'm being harsh on Switzerland, but at half-time, and the match stats don't lie, Switzerland had no shots on target. So then nobody expected that when Switzerland had a corner on the 64th minute, that the ball would end up in the back of Colombia's goal and Switzerland would take a 1-0 lead. It didn't take long for Colombia to respond, and unsurprisingly, of all of Colombia's players, it was Falcao who put his side back on level terms. Nothing else happened until the added time board went up, and after then, the game livened back up. Switzerland nearly snatched a win in the final few moments, but then Colombia did. Yes, for the second game in a row, Colombia knocked out a team through a winning goal in injury time. Sanchez gave Colombia a corner 1 minute after the game should have ended, and Cardona scored from that corner to win the game in its final few seconds. After the celebrations, the game kicked off and instantly ended long after it should have. Colombia knocked out England at the very end of that match, and they pulled the same trick on Switzerland. To be fair, they were by far the better side. Switzerland only had one shot of their 6 on target, and Colombia, whilst they only just did it, beat Switzerland and advanced through to the semi-finals. The final quarter-final match was between Uruguay and Croatia. Now sit tightly because this game was a goal fest. So let's not mess about. 7 minutes in, some passing play between Suarez and Nandez allowed Uruguay to take an early lead. Mario Mandzukic had a chance on the half volley for Croatia, but it was comfortably saved. I don't want to say that was all that happened in the first half, but that is all I'm showing. Sure, there were more chances, but we saw Croatia's only chance and the others were from Uruguay, who were already leading. You may also be wondering why there was only one goal in the first half in this supposed goal fest game. Well, if there's anything I've learned from watching matches with 20-minute halves on Legendary difficulty, 15-minute halves on Legendary, and also 15-minute halves on World Class, and that is, the longer the AI play each other, the greater the chance they will score a goal. Also, on Legendary AI, the conversion rate from shots to goals can be ridiculous. I once saw a game where 10 goals were scored. This game isn't quite as extreme, but there were still 7 goals scored. That's right, 6 goals are still yet to be scored in this game, even with it on only 10-minute halves. So then, let's go to the first goal in the second half, and the second one overall, and the second one for Uruguay. This time it was Edison Cavani who directed the ball into the bottom left corner and doubled Uruguay's lead in some style. Croatia weren't going to take this lying down. Just 6 minutes later, an indirect free kick from Luka Modric went to Kramaric, who passed to Brozovic, whose shot was saved but rolled over to Perisic, who slid in and grabbed a goal for Croatia and halved their deficit to Uruguay. Skipping ahead all the way to the 87th minute, and as you would expect given what I've said previously, it was another Croatian goal. But that was only because Mandzukic was determined to make it happen. He had the ball just outside the 6-yard box, but was dispossessed by Jimenez, and that, 90% of the time, would have been the end of that. But instead Mandzukic took the ball back from Uruguay, turned around, chipped it into an unmarked Kramaric, who headed it backwards into the goal to take this match into extra time. Very bravely, Uruguay subbed off Luis Suarez just before the start of extra time. Whilst he may not have featured too prominently in this game, if I was Uruguay's manager, I would much rather have him on the pitch as opposed to on the sidelines. Perhaps that was related to what happened next. Perhaps it wasn't, but 99 minutes into the game, a Croatian attack had come to a standstill. That is until Kalinic was tackled, and handily for him, the ball rolled straight into the path of Mario Mandzukic, who had all the time and space in the world to fire home and for the first time this game, give Croatia the lead. This didn't last long, as just 4 minutes later, Uruguay rocketed the ball long and it found Diego Godin on the right wing. He ran upfield, crossed it into Christian Rodriguez, who was able to header it past a bewildered Subasic and brought the scoreline to 3-3. In the final half of extra time, the game just got more and more tense. Stuani looked certain to hand the win to Uruguay, but his shot hit the post and rebounded away from goal. After that near miss, and with all the players heavily fatigued by this point in the match, Perisic made one last run up the left hand side of the pitch, and before he was closed down, he lobbed it into Mandzukic, who stole the match win for Croatia with the 7th goal of the game. Uruguay tried all they could, and Godin, who played more like an attacking midfielder than a defender in the final few minutes, nearly scored Uruguay's 4th goal in the game alone. In the final minute of the game, Stuani had the perfect opportunity to take the game into a penalty shootout, but a dreadful through ball went straight into the arms of Croatia's keeper, and that was that. Stuani, who came on to replace Suarez, didn't quite have the same killer instinct up front, and that arguably cost Uruguay the win and a shot at the World Cup. So just to clarify, at the end of this breathless game, it ended Uruguay 3, Croatia 4. So you can see the results from the 4 quarter-final games on screen, and those results mean that the semi-finals will look like this. The first semi-final, in many people's eyes, will decide the winners of the World Cup, as France will go up against Brazil. Having said that, the other semi-final features Croatia versus Colombia, and those are 2 countries you do not want to underestimate. Croatia have a squad full of decent players and could give either France or Brazil a run for their money. Colombia for me have been the biggest surprise in this 2-part series, and whatever the circumstances are, they will somehow pull out a win in injury time. They've done it twice before, and will it be 3 times in a row when they play Croatia? Well, before we find out, let's have a look at what is arguably the most important game of the tournament. It's France versus Brazil in the first of 2 semi-finals here in Russia. 3 minutes into this all-important game, Gabriel Jesus, Brazil's hero when they played Belgium, was one-on-one with Lloris but lost out on this occasion. At the other end of the pitch, France had their turn on goal, but the move was spearheaded by Griezmann, and Giroud never really had the attacking edge to create a goal. Back to Brazil, and this time it was Jesus who provided the ball towards the shot taker, in this case Neymar, but even he fluffed the shot and dragged it wide from just outside the 6-yard box. Late on in the first half, the French front two of Giroud and Griezmann strung together a better attacking move. This time Giroud passed to Griezmann, whose shot rifled into the back of Brazil's net and gave France a 1-0 lead heading into half-time. Brazil tried to bring the game back level within the first 45 minutes, with Danilo, who ran all the way from the halfway line to the 18-yard box to have a crack on goal, getting the closest for Brazil. Brazil became increasingly frustrated, and who can blame them? In the final 10 minutes of the game, they really started to swarm France's box, and tragically, this was Brazil's first real attack in the second half. Fernandinho had a shot blocked by one of the defenders, and Brazil, try as they might, couldn't find a ball through that would give them that goal-scoring opportunity they were so desperately hoping for. After that skirmish, France went back on the attack, and from nowhere, Kylian Mbappe had a shot on goal, and it rather beautifully went past everyone and into the back of the net. That gave France a 2-goal lead, and Brazil would need to emulate their fellow South American country of Colombia to get back into the game. As a result of Brazil piling all of their men forwards, they were exposed at the back, and it was only the woodwork that stopped a Giroud goal, and thus Brazil falling 3 goals behind France. In injury time, Brazil did get a shot away, but Coutinho's effort wasn't enough to save Brazil's hopes, or even grab a last-minute consolation goal for the team. And that was that. France beat Brazil by 2 goals come the final whistle. So we have to say bye-bye to the most successful country in World Cup history from this year's tournament, and also bye-bye to the prospect of an all-South American final. However, given how Brazil played, and certainly after the match stats, it's fairly evident that would be the result, as the stats show that France were the better side, and that was indisputably the case in the second half. To see who will take on France in the final and who will face Brazil in the third place playoff, we'll have to take a look at the semi-final fixture between Croatia and Colombia. Let me just say that, and this is a reflection of FIFA 18's AI in general, and not this particular match, but much more happened in the second half. Croatia had a chance to get a shot away, but there was so much faffing around from Mandzukic and Modric that by the time they tried to shoot, the entire Colombian team had caught up with them. At the other end of the pitch, James Rodriguez had a go-on-goal from a free kick, but he couldn't get the ball back up and then down again within the distance. 5 minutes later, there was some very quick passing from Aguilar to Rodriguez to Falcao, who beat the keeper, but the woodwork beat him. And on the rebound, Croatia collected it and then cleared it. So then, let's move on to the much more eventful second half. Luka Modric was powering towards goal, and rather selflessly, instead of having a shot himself, instead he dinked it across to Kramaric, who had a shot blocked by David Ospina. James Rodriguez had a go-on-goal in the 69th minute, and whilst he beat the keeper, he also narrowly missed the goal. Back to Croatia, and a series of rapid-fire passes ended when the ball rolled to Mandzukic's feet, and then he turned 180 degrees, shot, and got close to breaking this game's deadlock. Back to Colombia, and it almost seems like these two sides were taking it in turn to have an attempt on goal. Anyway, this was their best chance yet, but Carlos Bacca chose to keep the ball on ground, which Subasic was able to block. The game looked certain to go to extra time, but this is Colombia, they don't do extra time. So in injury time, they had what was sure to be one last attack. The ball came to Carlos Bacca, and this time he hit the ball with much more energy, beating Subasic and sending the ball straight into the top right corner. And that was it. The goal came in added time, so once the match kicked off again, it was pretty much over. Croatia tried and failed to score in the game's final few seconds, so that means for the third time this tournament, Colombia have bested and knocked out a team through a goal in injury time. They beat England in the round of 16 stage in this sort of manner. They got one over Switzerland to steal the win in added time in the quarter-finals, and now they've knocked out Croatia through a 90th minute goal. It's a remarkable skill for Colombia to have, scoring and winning games in the final few moments when, crucially, no one sees it coming. But we now know their style of play, and it worked on England, Switzerland and Croatia, but can they do it again against France? Well, if they do, they will win the 2018 World Cup. Before we head to the match we all want to see, instead let's watch the third place playoff between what were, remarkably, the two losing sides from the semi-finals. I would have guessed that Brazil v Croatia would have been the final given the semi-final fixtures, but instead these two teams will be battling for third place. The first meaningful chance in their tie came from Brazil, and specifically Paulinho, but his shot was saved and the resulting corner didn't lead to much else. Just 2 minutes later, and at the other end of the pitch, a not so meaningful attack suddenly became very dangerous as Modric made a brilliant through ball to Perisic, who dribbled the ball incredibly close to Alisson, then shot the ball into the sides of the goal to give Croatia an early lead. At half time, Brazil only had 2 shots. That's so unusual from a team which, traditionally, has had so much attacking flair. Never mind the fact they've only got 1 shot on target. Things didn't get much better for Brazil in the second half. After a free kick didn't initially transpire into much, Casemiro thought he'd have a crack on the rebound, but his shot missed the target by quite some way. Then, in the 61st minute, Brazil were lucky not to go down to 10 men. Marquinhos slide tackled Mandzukic from behind, getting the ball, but also obliterating Mandzukic in the process. Croatia won a free kick, Marquinhos somehow wasn't booked, and the free kick, taken by Rakitic, was skied over the goal. Croatia later won themselves a corner, but Brazil weren't able to clear the ball after the initial cross didn't find anyone, and so Perisic had the fairly easy task of shooting from close range, and as such he doubled Croatia's lead over Brazil. On the counter-attack, after a broken down Croatian attack, Philippe Coutinho ran with the ball from behind the halfway line all the way into the penalty area, got past the defender chasing him, shot and missed the goal. And that sums up Brazil's game. In the first place playoff, Brazil lost 2-0 to Croatia. I wouldn't have expected that prior to kickoff, but given how Brazil played, it isn't that surprising. Lots of their attacking players just didn't turn up. Neymar, for example, didn't have a single shot all game. Brazil, in their entirety, only had 5 shots all game and only 2 on target. Croatia, meanwhile, had as many shots on target as Brazil had shots in general, and as many goals as Brazil had shots on target. And let's not forget that Brazil should have only played with 10 men for the final third of the game, but either way, Croatia ends the 2018 World Cup in 3rd place, at least according to FIFA 18. So then, the moment we've all been waiting for. The 2018 World Cup final between France and Colombia. It's not exactly the likeliest of finals. In fact, the manner in which Colombia got here is absurd. But this is what FIFA 18 has thrown up, and I'm not exactly going to argue against it. Anyway, let's see which country FIFA 18 reckons is going to win the World Cup. James Rodriguez tried to score an uncharacteristically early goal for Colombia, but his attempt missed its target. France weren't sitting back, and just minutes later, Paul Pogba got closer than Rodriguez did earlier on. But then, just another few minutes further on, Colombia got even closer. Rodriguez passed the ball over to Cardona, who hit the post. The rebounding ball then found itself back at the feet of James Rodriguez, who gave Colombia a 1-0 lead over France in the World Cup final. Mbappe had a wonderful chance to level the game again, but the pressure got to him and his shot was horribly missed. Cuadrado made a similar error, missing what should have been a surefire second goal for Colombia. In the 34th minute of the game, Griezmann and Giroud made a 1-2 between them that meant Giroud was able to shoot and score from just outside the 6-yard box. That took the scoreline to 1-1, and then, only 6 minutes later, Pogba received the ball from Griezmann, backheeled it to Giroud, who scored his second goal of the game to give France the lead at half-time. Granted, Colombia nearly ensured that wouldn't be the case, but Falcao's shot was blocked by Sidibe before it got close to the goal. Into the second half now, and Matuidi nearly doubled France's lead, and if I'm being honest, he probably should have done. But then, the hero of the World Cup was confirmed. Olivier Giroud scored a wonderful goal that ended up in the top right corner of Colombia's goal, giving France a 2-goal lead and securing his hat-trick this game. But if there is anything we've learned from Colombia, and that is you can't ever rule them out. They beat England, Switzerland and Croatia to get to this point, and in all 3 of those matches they scored and won in injury time, so I wouldn't put anything past them. France were wise to this, and once we got past the magic 80-minute mark, France got defensive just so they couldn't be the 4th team to be beaten by Colombia in injury time. Let's not forget Colombia scored 2 goals in 2 minutes when they played against England. But many non-converted chances later, and with France just dribbling the ball with no real purpose other than to keep the ball in Colombia's half for as long as possible, Colombia weren't able to get enough possession to grab a win or even level the game from behind. The full-time whistle blew after 3 nervy minutes of injury time, and France were crowned the 2018 World Cup winners. So while we watch France's celebrations, of course I'm not saying that this will be in any way accurate to the real-life World Cup. I mean, to get to this point, Argentina and Spain were both knocked out in the groups, England lost to Colombia, Germany got knocked out to Switzerland, and Brazil were beaten by France in the semi-final, and I dare say that was the most plausible part of this tournament. France could well win the World Cup. I've even put a £5 bet on them to win because of this, but that doesn't exactly mean much. But whilst they could win it, there is no way they will win through anything like the sort of circumstances we saw here. Anyway, with that all said, and with the 2018 World Cup, according to FIFA 18, completed, I'll end this video off here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this 2-parter mini-series. If you did, be sure to leave a like, comment down below, and I'll see you guys later when the normal Formula 1 based videos resume. So, I'll see you guys then.